Punisher, and just first show of the tour here in Rouen. Punisher is a project where I mean, it's not a project. It's 12 years now. So I was playing guitar in a band, and then I got rid of my band, and you started playing along with the drum machine or a computer, but then a lot of that is pressing play and letting it go while you play over it. So I decided that I slowly wanted to make everything live, you know. So I created these kind of ways to physically control sound so that I could play the beats live rather than pressing play on a sequencer. I would say it started out much more in the kind of metal, Neurosis, Melvins, Godflesh, a lot of the really heavy, slow, drony stuff. And then it kind of, in the late 90s, early 2000s, moved more electronic into a lot of drum and bass and into the early dubstep and some of the really heavy dub stuff. And then, you know, things like Flying Lotus more recently and some of the really chaotic, organic sounding electronic stuff is what I really like. And now maybe like Andy Stott and the Modern Love label is stuff I really love. It kind of came out of going to art school. I was doing engineering and then I switched to art, and I went back to school because, yeah, there's not a lot of subsidies. So by being in a school where they pay for your schooling and then you have a little bit of money, you know, while you teach, while you're in graduate school. So that's kind of our way of getting some government subsidy. So for 3 years I was able to build my machines, and then after that I had to pay for it myself. But yeah, most of my gear is made. Yeah, I don't purchase that much, so other than laptops. But then I had a sort of sponsorship from Lenovo. This is a laptop company for a little bit, for 2 years, but that didn't continue. There's different components to it. Some of it is when I first make some new machines, and I've had several different versions. It's very droney because I'm experimenting and trying to figure out, and I'll just write songs that are a little bit more improvisational. And then I think once I learn to play them a little bit better, I can riff out a little bit more and actually make coherent songs. But this album in particular, from working with Phil Anselmo, I think some of that had to do with me wanting to work on my vocals a little bit more. And when we recorded, you know, I cover up a lot of stuff with effects and just, you know, and he made me record them totally clean. And so then he didn't even know that I could sing because he'd only heard me singing through like drone pedals and distortion. So we started to layer and do some harmonies and stuff. And then he started working on the songs with me, and we kind of, he's eccentric, you know, but you know, he's a rock star, but at the same time he wears the same clothes every day, you know, and he only cares about music, you know, and the people that are around him. So when he wakes up in the morning, you know, there's a horror movie playing in his house, you know, he walks out and has his coffee, there's some horror movie on, and then he'll sit down and email, and then he goes to the studio, you know, and he really understands heavy music. And I think that's why when you sit down and play riffs for him, you know, he would take my riff and say, no, do it this way, it'll be heavier, you know. He always knew how to do that, and I wouldn't have worked with him if I didn't find that connection. I would say, you know, I wrote the songs, I showed up and wrote the songs, but he threw out like one of my songs, and I sort of agreed with him, you know. It was lackluster, and so I ended up writing 2 songs in his studio. You know, I made them leave the studio for 2 days, and I wrote it there, and they're 2 of my favorite songs, you know. And so it's, you know, he worked on the lyrics with me, and, you know, just things that I didn't even used to put lyrics in my albums, you know. I wouldn't even write them down. And I like the films that I like abstract stuff, you know. I'm not super direct and political in ways that are literal. I try to be a little bit more vague, but yeah, you know, it's the typical topics of dystopia, and, you know. This is my first. This one over here is you know, it's made for your right hand, And so this is like a drum machine, essentially. And what it does is there's 8 buttons, and I can press with my fingers. And so different combinations of buttons do different things, depending on where the slider is. And this thing reads the position everywhere where the slider is, so it's always feeding this data back to the computer. And depending on which combination of buttons I press at different positions, you get different sounds. And depending on how hard you press it, you get a different velocity. And I try to make everything on here functional, so like the idea hit this. I have another one of these that's very long and fixed and really heavy. And I don't bring it on tour to Europe with me because it's too much money to bring it. But you can turn this and adjust the length, so you can have a very short throw for like faster stuff or a very long throw. And all the electronics are behind this kind of camera bellows. So, and then the wires have feedback on this kind of chain thing, which they use to feed wires. But there's an Arduino in here. I don't know, you might have heard Arduino. It's like a little tiny programmable microcontroller for, you know, DIY robotics projects and things. This is a similar. You might want to get over here if you look at the keys on here. They slide. It's basically just like a sliding key controller, you know, a pitch bend. And I just really wanted something that was like a synth that you could play like keys, but it wasn't fixed. You know, like you know, it's really simple. That's all I wanted, and I couldn't find one anywhere that you could buy. They have ones that are just like a little pad for your finger that are this far. But why not make it bigger so you can actually, like, you know, I built this a long time ago and it's taken a beating. This is the mini version. These are 2 keyboards that are on top of each other, so you can play them. You can play the same key, almost like an organ. And again, why don't they sell these like this? Why everybody should want this. You can play like 2 keyboards with one hand at the same time. This is this was the first machine I ever made. This was originally, I mean, I built this from scratch, but it was in a wood case, and it had little dials up here where you could see there were motors attached to each one of these, so you would set a position and then it would fight you. And so you could read on the motor how hard and how much current was going through the motor and how much power was being drawn. And you could also record a motion and then it would play it back, like autopilot. So it does volume and then pitch. So the new album has a lot of this in it. This is my microphone. If you look at the other side, it has little 8 different microphones that you can sing into. And then on here you can actually see the microphones. And these are very cheap microphones, like $2 each, that you put in your laptop. So they're not expensive, and I have to say I have a 57 or a 58. When I do at home, sometimes I'm singing through one because I think these are screwed up or something. I can't tell the difference. You know, it's not that I made a great microphone. It's just like you don't need a super awesome microphone to make music. And then finally, I didn't bring my masks with me, sadly, but this is basically a contact mic that goes on your throat and picks up the vibrations on your trachea. So you strap it onto your throat, and it's very sensitive, and you can like rumble your throat and pick it up through like the subwoofers. So I'll be using this tonight as well.